Everyone loves a good hot hatch. You can't beat that combination of a powerful engine, hilarious handling, and good everyday practicality. But what will electric hot hatches look like in the future? Rubbish? Well, let's find out. Today we have the Abarth 500e and the MG4 XPower. We're going to put them head to head to find out which is better, which is most fun, and importantly, whether either of these are as good as a traditional gas hatch. Let's get some hardcore specs out of the way, shall we? The Abarth is slightly smaller with 2 doors as opposed to 4 on the MG, but it's more expensive, £38,500 compared to £36,500 for the MG. Despite being cheaper, the MG gets 2 motors and all-wheel drive instead of 1 and front-wheel drive on the Abarth, and it has a bigger battery, 62 kilowatt hours versus 38 kilowatt hours. Both cars are designed to be sporty, but there is one huge difference: power. The Abarth has 154 horsepower. Cute. This has 429. That's 44 more than a Porsche 911 Carrera. MG says this car will do 0 to 62 in 3.8 seconds. Let's see if that's true. Right, sport mode. Launch. Ooh. Yeah, okay, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 miles an hour. That's 100 miles an hour. Wind noise, a little bit of buffeting, and we are at 121 miles, 122 miles an hour, 123, 124, 125, 126, 127. Okay, I'm braking. 127 miles an hour, flat out. The acceleration was very impressive. I mean, for a car that costs less than 40 grand. Nuts. The MG did 0 to 62 in 3.9 seconds and the quarter mile in 12.3. That makes it potentially the fastest car you can buy at this price point. Let's launch the Abarth 500e as well, shall we? Just for giggles. Before I do that, I want to show you this car's party trick. It has a sound generator, which means that it mimics the sound that its petrol-powered counterparts make using speakers on the outside. Look at this. When you press the power button, it makes a little guitar riff. Don't know if you can hear that. And then you can hear the idling noise of an Abarth 595/695. You can even rev it, listen. Interesting. Now, I'm not gonna lie to you, everyone has the right to do as much stupid stuff as they want, but I feel like Abarth are really abusing that privilege right now. Let's launch it. Right, drive, foot on the brake, go. Aww. 30. Okay, that's 40, 50, 65, 70, 80, 90, 100, 99, 99. Not the quickest car in the world, is it? Cute. As for the 0 to 62 time, the Abarth managed the sprint in a fairly unimpressive 7.6, with the quarter mile arriving eventually in 15.5. Obviously, straight line performance is only half the story. Part of the appeal of a hot hatch is in the looks, and both these cars are attractive, I think. We all know the Abarth 500e is based on the Fiat 500e, which means it's quite compact and cute, but there's some extra aggression with these lights and the scorpion badges on the side. Interestingly, Fiat and therefore Abarth have a no grey policy, so all their cars are finished in bright colours, including this acid green. The MG4 isn't bad looking either though, and to me feels fresh given that the 500's shape hasn't really changed in 16 years. This car is available in grey, if that's your bag, but I love the matte racing green seen here, the sharp styling, and there's plenty of detail to get lost in. The rear lights are especially clever, with a unique light signature behind an acrylic panel helping the car stand out, especially at night. I also really like the interior of this car. If you're thinking MGs are low quality, then you're in for a bit of a shock because there's nothing really to complain about inside. For a start, you get some wireless charging for your mobile phone up here. Nice, easy to reach controls. And in terms of infotainment and technology, there's plenty of that with a big old display up here in the center and also one for your driver data. There's also a lot of storage in this car, in the center console down here, and also some cup holders, plus in this central storage bin. And also the materials are surprisingly good. The leather on the dashboard isn't the best, but I do like this chrome effect for the vents down here. And on the seats and doors, you get a nice mixture of leather, Alcantara, and red stitching. It's pretty impressive in here. The Abarth is a step down in terms of interior quality. There's definitely more cheap plastic on show, especially on the doors. Every time you go to open them, you'll feel that lack of quality in the materials on the handle and the window buttons. The Abarth also doesn't feel quite as good in terms of fit and finish, with some bits not feeling particularly well screwed down. It's also not the kind of car that many would want to use as a family vehicle. It does have rear seats, but there's only really enough room for 3 adult passengers, and the boot is pretty small. If you want usability, you are much better off buying the MG4 with its generous rear space and reasonably sized boot. Let's talk about the most important aspect of hot hatchery, which is of course the fun factor. And I'm going to start in the Abarth 500e. The first thing you notice when you get in this car is the sound, which seems like a quite bizarre thing to say about an electric car, but honestly it is. You press the power button and it plays this little guitar riff, and then you pull away and you can hear an almost synthesized version of the 595. Now I've got to give credit to Abarth. It's a great idea in principle, and I've also got to give them credit for creating a dedicated team of people who spent 6,000 hours creating this noise. But I've also got to call a spade and say this noise is trash. It really is. Not saying I could do better, but it is what it is. And it is not very good. The first 10 minutes of using it are actually okay. It's quite impressive. It's an interesting gimmick, shall we say. And it makes driving an electric car seem a little bit more interesting, I guess. But there are problems with this sound generator, which I will tell you. First of all, it's just one long drone. And when you accelerate, it picks up in frequency or pitch, which is designed to mimic the sound of an ICE engine getting higher up through the rev range. But at the same time, you also hear in the background the sound of a 595 idling. So you get both noises. You get the acceleration noise and the idle noise at exactly the same time, which is just bizarre. Real cars don't do that. The second problem is when you're driving on a motorway, for example, doing 70 miles an hour, it just makes a constant drone that makes you feel like you're almost stuck in third gear for the entire trip. You almost want to change up. Yeah, I'm not impressed. Half the time it just sounds like a CVT gearbox, which is probably the worst thing you want your hot hatch to sound like. And the other half of the time, it just sounds like a toy. Luckily you can turn it off. Okay, as for the driving experience, well, the acceleration isn't particularly impressive. 0 to 62 in around 7 seconds, so it's about a second slower than a 695, but actually it's quicker in other acceleration metrics. So according to Abarth, this car accelerates quicker between 25 and 37 miles an hour. And it's that kind of quote unquote in-gear acceleration that means the 500e is actually quicker than the 695 around their test circuit in Italy. Okay, what's it like in the corners? That's kind of this car's party trick, really. It's reasonably light for an EV. It weighs 1,400 kilograms. And yeah, I know that's about 400 kilograms heavier than a 695, but you can really chuck it into a bend and it definitely sticks. I mean, look at this. I'll just bung it in here. There's a lot of grip in this car, and you don't feel an awful lot of inertia compared to a lot of electric cars as it goes through the corner. It turns in pretty accurately as well. You point it at the apex, it goes hunting for it. And as you go towards the exit of the corner, there's a little bit of understeer, just gently pushing you out wide. But that's the party trick. This is a car you can just toss into a corner with almost reckless abandon, and it will stick, or it will just gently wash out wide in a nice, safe manner. I guess the one downside is that the Abarth 500e feels a bit like it's on rails, really. You can't really get it wrong in this car. You bung it into a corner and it pretty much goes exactly where you want. It's not dancing, it's not up on its toes, it's not a dance partner. You're kind of along for the ride. And if you like that kind of thing, then great, but the very best hot hatches give as well as take. And right now, I don't feel as connected to the driving experience as I want to be. I'll tell you what would make this more interesting: a third pedal, a clutch pedal and a manual gearbox. I know it's highly unlikely. It is possible to put a manual gearbox in an electric car. It wouldn't necessarily be the most efficient thing to do, but it would add a lot to the driving experience, especially in a car like this. Just being able to involve some of my other limbs, my left foot, for example, my left arm, just rowing up and down a box, I think that would make this a much more immersive driving experience. Right now, I kind of feel like I'm playing a computer game, if I'm honest with you. Right, what's the MG like? Oh, hello! Did you see that? It just completely stepped out on me. I was not expecting that. Little bit of personality there, MG4 XPower. Okay, so very different experience driving this MG4 XPower. First thing you notice is the car feels a little bit more grown up, a bit more sensible. It's a larger car and the suspension's not quite as jiggly and bouncy as it was in the Abarth 500e. The seats seem more comfortable as well, not quite as supportive. I am sliding out my seat a little bit more in comparison, but I have a lower driving position, so I feel a little bit more connected to the car. Also, it doesn't make a stupid noise, which is definitely worth something. Now, I've got to reiterate just how fast this car is in a straight line. We've already seen it a minute ago, but my God, it's not wanting for acceleration at all. If you want to overtake someone, put your foot down and you will disappear. It's quick. I guess the one downside are the brakes. From the outside, they look much larger than the brakes in the Abarth 500e, but I don't think it stops quite as well as that car. There's a couple of reasons for that. First of all, this car is 1,800 kilograms, so there's a lot more inertia as you approach a braking zone. The second reason is that the braking is split into regenerative braking and also physical braking, and the feel between regen and physical isn't particularly consistent. I think this car goes much better than it stops. So MG have changed the suspension for this car compared to the standard model. It's 25% stiffer at the front and 10% stiffer at the rear. Not uncomfortable by any stretch of the imagination. It's just there to help you in the bends. And speaking of that, this car, it doesn't seem to have quite as much grip in the corners as the Abarth. But my goodness, it is a lot more playful. You can feel it going into kind of snap oversteer mid-corner, and while some people might be terrified at that, I am actually embracing that. This car feels much more up on its toes in the corners and is much more of a driver's car, I think. I wasn't expecting that. I'm slightly impressed. What's the general balance like through the corners? Well, electric cars tend to do best when you're going at 8/10 rather than 10/10, aka flat out. And when you do that, the balance is actually pretty impressive. It's actually quite rear biased, so as you drive into a corner, you can feel the back end slightly wanting to rotate, but the minute that rotation occurs, the front axle kicks in and it pulls it straight and just hauls you out of a corner. Very impressive. still, having it move around underneath you ever so slightly just makes you feel that much more connected to the driving experience. What's the steering like? I'll carry a bit too much speed into here. Actually, there's a little bit of feel there, and you can feel the chassis start to rotate underneath you as well. Yes, I wouldn't say a Golf GTI has anything to worry about, but I will say whoever put this car together, yeah, they knew what they were doing. The only thing I will say is that if you're trying to push really hard, as in take this car to a track day, I don't think these are the world's grippiest tires. And also when you're really pushing, you can definitely feel the electronic stability control system trying to gather things up that maybe it shouldn't be gathering up, trying to save your life when you don't need it, and that does hamper your performance. But it's a pretty impressive car, especially for the money, especially for the straight line performance.
It is of course worth touching on the range and recharging ability of both cars. The Abarth will manage 164 miles if driven sensibly and will recharge at 85 kilowatts. Not the fastest, but then the battery is small, so charging is quicker by default. The MG4 XPower recharges at a more respectable 135 kilowatts and has a superior range of 239 miles, if you drive it sensibly. But what happens when you don't drive these cars sensibly and decide to set some hot laps? Well, I decided to find out. I ran a head-to-head with a rolling start to nullify the MG's massive straight line advantage. But even by the first corner a couple of hundred yards up the road over the crest of the hill, the MG had pulled out a lead. Into this fast right-hander, the MG gets squirmy once again, but drags itself out of the bend with great all-wheel drive traction and sets off down the road, pulling a gap. The Abarth is up to speed by now, but just doesn't have the power to keep up under acceleration, even with it having plenty of grip. By the time we reach the most twisty section of track, the gap is now up to 2.1 seconds, and it's the last hope for the Abarth to carry some speed through this sequence and reduce the gap. It doesn't quite play out that way though, because by the time these cars power through the final corner and head towards the line, the MG is 2.3 seconds ahead. Impressive, especially on a very short lap.
These cars are very interesting, but maybe for the wrong reasons. They are both hot hatches in the sense that they offer a bit more athleticism than you get in the standard versions. But I feel like there's still quite a long way to go before they deliver the fun factor you get in anything with a badge that says GTI, ST or N. Obviously they are greener, so they have that advantage, especially that thing, it's very green. But there's still a little bit of work to be done before they get to the same levels as a traditional gas-powered hot hatch.
That being said, they are not as far away as people might think. Yes, they lack the noise and involvement, and yes, they do weigh considerably more, but these things are still a blast, even on track. If I was to choose one, I'd personally go for the MG. It's quicker, it's cheaper, it's more versatile, and doesn't lose out too much in terms of looks to the Abarth. The very green 500e is still commendable though, and here's hoping that the next generation of hot hatches takes the groundwork laid by these two to new levels.